Is that okay? Okay, we'll go ahead and we'll get started. So I'm excited to be here today. I think I recognize most of the faces in the audience. I'm going to talk to you today about a faculty development initiative we've been doing in the Division of General Internal Medicine for the past 2 years now. So just kind of as an overview, a roadmap of where we're going, I'm going to give a brief bit of background overviewing kind of best practices for faculty development and the role of peer coaching. And then we're going to overview the curriculum itself, and then we're actually going to do a live demonstration in the kind of the last half of our hour, so get ready to participate. I don't have to tell you all that the roles and responsibilities of teaching faculty are continually in evolution, which means that as clinician educators, we must develop and maintain a breadth of skills across many domains, including clinical practice, teaching, and scholarship. And faculty development programs are essential to the upkeep of those skills. When you look at how faculty development can be delivered, you can see that it can be across a spectrum of formal, peer, and informal programming. So things like reflecting on experience and learning through observation versus more formal things like formal feedback or workshops or seminars. It can also be delivered in the individual context or in the group context. We know that faculty development's a very effective mode. When you look at studies, in addition to high satisfaction, studies indicate that there are improved attitudes towards teaching and self-reported and actual tested gains in knowledge and teaching skills. Moreover, I think that faculty development programs foster learning communities, which benefit educators and their institutions. So for faculty, these kind of programs provide networking, mentorship, and a social structure, which are really important for career enhancement and job satisfaction. For institutions, these kind of programmings help to increase faculty productivity, they develop leaders, and they enhance professional identity formation, which really can lead to enhanced retention of faculty. Unfortunately, we know that faculty development is really underutilized. There are several barriers to faculty development efforts, including methodological components, things like creating opportunities for learner-driven experiences, making topics relevant, identifying your content deliverer or your teacher of teachers, and then the perceived lack of financial or other recognition for teaching. On top of those are the ever-present barriers of time and logistics, things like volume of clinical duties and or institutional support or lack thereof. In July of 2016, Yvonne Steinert, who is a pioneer in the faculty development literature, published a systematic review of faculty development initiatives and highlighted several best practices of successful efforts. So these include longitudinal programming, which have relevant and practice-based content and utilize experiential learning with feedback and reflection, coupled with this idea of intentional community building. So given that, when we look back at the figure that I showed you a few moments ago, you can see that the informal and the work-based learning strategies, the ones highlighted here in the blue box, tend to be more effective than the one-time, very teacher-directed activities like workshops and seminars, which are in the up-hand corner. When you look at the prevalence of types of faculty development initiatives, however, most of those published end up being in that right-hand corner because they're most easy to implement, right? So I'd also like to highlight peer coaching as a means to provide this kind of highly personal, learner-centered work-based learning. That's what we're going to be talking about today. So some of these slides, I took some of the content from a talk that Asher Tulsky gave a few years ago on coaching, but Peter Bluckert is a pretty well-known executive coach who's also well-published in the literature, and he defines coaching as the facilitation of learning and development with a purpose of improving performance and enhancing effective action, goals achievement, and personal satisfaction. The goal or the objective of a coach is to help the individual question their automatic thoughts, beliefs, and perceptions, to shift their perspective to look at new options with a goal of eliciting solutions from the individual, and helping that individual move from kind of a reactivity to a purposeful response. So you can think of a coach really then as a motivator. And I would just highlight that coaching is somewhat different than mentorship, right? We see our mentor as somewhat of an authority who defines the agenda, focuses on problems, tends to have the answers, whereas a coach is should be conceptualized more of as a partner who focuses on self-efficacy and possibilities, and is a co-discoverer of answers. Published models of peer coaching describe 3 distinct phases of the coaching event. So first is a pre-observation discussion. And during that time, the coach asks the individual questions to identify their learning objectives, the context, and the person's expectations and goals. Following that is a direct observation of the individual by the coach. And then finally, you have a post-observation debriefing session where these observations are shared, constructive feedback is provided, and then a shared reflection occurs. As a part of that step, plans are made for future encounters. So what are we going to do the next time you're in this situation? So first, this integration of both self and joint reflection, coupled with feedback and a really supportive environment, has been demonstrated to lead to both improved teaching skills, incorporation of new strategies, and long-term changes in teaching practice. In addition, and this is really important, the benefits extend to the coach in addition to the individual being coached. Unfortunately, these same studies which show these kind of beautiful outcomes highlight a lot of barriers to enrollment and sustainment of peer coaching programs. You can imagine that setting up longitudinal one-on-one coaching, it's hard to coordinate schedules. It can be time intensive and resource intensive for both the coach and the individual being coached, especially if you're using kind of an expert coach model, of which you may have few depending on the depth of your department or division, right? So more recently, video technology has been used to mitigate some of these barriers. In addition, it provides the opportunity for kind of out-of-the-moment review and a very unbiased external perspective. So in that way, it mitigates what we know is the inaccuracy of self-assessment in real time. Most of the existing studies which use video coaching are in the context of residency education. They tend to be focused on communication type skills, and they tend to be a one-on-one coaching. They tend to describe one-on-one coaching interventions, again in the context of a patient encounter. And until recently, the use of video hasn't really been widely adopted for faculty development for medical educators. So that leads us to our initiative, which was to use this kind of video technology to bring real-life teaching encounters to a large group of peer coaches across a spectrum of teaching experience. So our aim was to both improve the observation and reflection skills of our faculty and to expand personal and teaching and education practices in a time and a resource intensive or efficient way. Excuse me. So briefly, I know some of you have participated in this curriculum, but for those of you who haven't seen it in action, first we asked faculty to video a teaching session, and we told them that any kind of teaching encounter with any level of learner would do. We did ask that they exclude walk-arounds to make sure we didn't have patient identifiable data, and we asked them not to videotape feedback or evaluation sessions with learners. And we videoed these sessions for the most part using iPhone technology. After recording the video, we asked the faculty to review their recording, reflect on things that went well or perhaps didn't go as well as they had hoped, and select a 5-minute clip for review with a specific question in mind. We held group sessions quarterly, and these had a very structured approach in which the faculty first presented their video, so oriented the group to the learners, the context, etc., and their kind of question that they wanted the group to focus feedback on and around. And then after watching the video, the facilitator then led the group to first identify things that the teacher did well, and then to provide feedback relevant to the person's self-identified focus. And then finally, after brainstorming these kind of teaching take-home points, all of the faculty in attendance were asked to commit to trying a new strategy with the goal of making this learning stick. So, the premise was that this video-based peer coaching curriculum involved a large number of faculty and therefore was time efficient and a reflective and learner-driven exercise, and it mitigates some of the previously described barriers to one-on-one peer coaching programs. And it also provides kind of a window into practice, which really we found in the past 2 years has served as a great springboard for discussion around various approaches to teaching. It's been really cool to hear from everyone different perspectives and different ways of doing things. And so I would say that our experience running this has really reinforced the prior work, that the joint reflection and comparative thinking really positively influences both the person showing the video and the coaches in the room, which is really neat. And so we are able to leverage the teaching moment across a large number of faculty. So that's kind of the premise. So with that, we're going to do this in real time. And then I'll come back and share with you some of our pearls from doing this over the past 2 years and answer any questions. I'm going to facilitate. You guys are going to be our group of peer coaches. And we're going to show a video here momentarily. But before we do that, so this is a video of Dr. Painter teaching. Dr. Painter, would you mind, as I pull up the video, kind of orienting everyone to the teaching moment?
Okay, so Sarah was kind enough to provide me with a script for what I was supposed to say. I have it in my pocket. Yeah. So when I was first approached, what I said was, you just show up sometime when you're available and do a session. Not I'm gonna do X, Y, or Z, and I'd like for you to film this particular thing that I'm trying or this particular thing that I'm doing. And that's kind of what we did. Sarah came. But when I looked at the film or looked at the video, the thing that I thought might be useful was the idea of using pathophysiology in teaching. So I wanted to try to emphasize the role that you can, the value of talking about pathophysiology in teaching sessions. So.
Okay, good. And this is and who are the learners in the room?
So the learners, this is board rounds. So the learners, the group was a little weird because the students were away or something,
okay.
and one of the interns was off, so a resident was there. So it was a pretty senior group.
Okay.
Sarah was there.
Videoing.
Group, so, but it was basically teaching rounds.
So teaching rounds.
Yeah, and the patient has cirrhosis and all the complications. There were mainly science was his main reason for admission.
Okay. So now group, what we're going to do is watch this video. We're going to focus on the incorporation of teaching about physiology in the teaching moment and reflect on ways that was done in this clip versus ways that you do it in your real teaching practice. And we can talk in general about how that goes, in addition to other things that you see. Okay, so.
Let's go back to the issue about spiders.
Yeah.
So when you say he didn't have spiders, that strongly implies that you know what a spider, how to find the spider angiomas. Okay. So how do you find spider? I mean, what are the criteria? What makes a spider a spider?
So typically, it's like
not an arachnoid, but a skin spider.
It's typically it's like a vascular malformation. It's like telangiectasia on the skin, usually on the chest, with kind of these projections that kind of look like, that's why they're called the spider.
Okay, so when you see a vascular structure on the skin,
yeah.
You want to tell whether it's a spider or not. I mean, one way is, does it look like a spider? Does it have a body and arms? Is there any other way that you can tell?
Not that I'm aware of.
They don't blanch.
They don't blanch?
It's a guess.
Oh, yeah, that was a guess. Okay. Actually, an incorrect guess. So they do blanch. Okay. Why do skin lesions blanch? Just in general, if you've got a skin lesion and it blanches, why does it blanch?
Restricted the blood flow.
Okay, because it's a vascular structure, and when you press on it, you're blocking off the inflow to that structure. Oops. And so any vascular structure is going to blanch. I have an hemangioma on my arm, a birthmark. If I press on it long enough, it goes away. Okay, it takes a little time, but it actually goes away. All right. So spiders blanch because they're vascular structures. Okay. Telangiectasias blanch because they're vascular structures. Some spiders actually look like spiders, but some maybe not quite so much. Is there any other way to tell that something's a spider? Let me ask a different question. What is it? What's a spider made up of? It's a vascular structure. What vascular structure is it?
Capillary.
So how good is your visual acuity? Can you see something that's capillary sized?
I can't.
No, you can't. It's not. Your vascular acuity isn't that good.
Group of capillaries.
Because the other one is due to backing up of the blood flow in varices and going up the umbilical vein
Okay.
artery.
Okay.
I don't know what this. I don't think this is.
Okay. That's not what's going on here. So, a spider is a vascular structure, and the vascular structure is an arteriolo-venule malformation. The arteriole is the body, and the venules are the legs. Okay. So, what do you think would happen? So if you have a structure that you think maybe is a spider, is there any way you could delineate that it really is one? What should that structure do? If it's an arteriolo-venule malformation and you blanch it, what would you expect to happen when you let go?
So
The body would fill with the legs.
It should fill from the center. A telangiectasia is not an arteriolo-venule malformation. A telangiectasia is a venule. So if you press on a venule and let go, it fills from end to end. It fills from whichever end the venule is, whichever way is flowing back toward the heart. From the furthest away from the heart to the closest to the heart. Okay? So if you've got something that you look on the skin, see where they're, sometimes these are they just blush. You don't really see the arms, you just see a red spot and you press on it, let go, and it fills, the blushes out from the center. Why do people get spider angiomas? Why do people with liver disease have spiders?
I know like the pulmonary edema has to do with decreased estrogen clearance.
Okay.
I don't know if that's a similar mechanism with the spiders.
Okay. It actually is.
Okay.
All right. And the reason it is because, and the same reason you get the pulmonary edema. Estrogen is a very potent vasodilator. Everybody has these AVMs, these arterial venule malformations. I have them, you have them, we all have them. But they're not open because the arteriole is clamped tight. When you have a lot of estrogen, it dilates and you get the structure. Okay, so that's why you get AVMs. I mean, that's why you get spiders. He actually has spiders. We should look at those sometime because he definitely has some spider angiomas on his skin. And so I was kind of prepared to. I mean, one of the things I'm sure everybody sitting here thinking is, who the hell cares? I mean, what possible difference does this make? The reason I go through this in some depth is because I think it's important to understand these things aren't just magic. It's not just like you have spiders and liver disease and you have this kind of abnormality in this disease and just memorizing a list of things. You still have to memorize it, but I think it's easier to conceptualize what's going on if you actually understand where it comes from. People have physical exam findings because physiology causes changes which lead to physical exam findings, not because some higher being decided it would be fun for people with liver disease to have spider angiomas.
Okay. So watching the clip back, I know it's been some time since you've seen it, Dr. Painter. What are the things that you notice in general, outside of my excellent
That
cinematography?
was the most striking thing was your desire not to show my face. I didn't take that as a personal insult.
Okay, good.
It was an accident. I was impressed, as I usually am, that actually nobody knew what a spider was.
Okay.
And why they happened. And this was actually a pretty sharp group of residents.
Okay.
It was a good group. And I was also impressed, I mean, this is the most important, it goes on too long. I feel I got bored
Okay.
of it, so I have a feeling that the learners might have also.
Okay.
But
Was that board watching it or teaching it?
I got bored watching it. I didn't feel it was too long when I was doing it, but now that I watch it, it seems like it's an awful lot of time for not something that's trivial, but something that there's other things that could be discussed. Other than that, I thought it went pretty much like I
Okay.
expected.
And what were the things that went well that or what were the things you liked about it?
I think it demonstrated. I mean, the most important part of this to me is the end.
Okay.
It's the explanation of why I really care about it. You know,
Okay.
not that it's that important that you know what causes a spider, but rather that you recognize that physiology matters and that physical exam findings are really reflections of physiology, and I think the group was getting that. I mean, it's hard to tell from that because you can't see the group, but I think they were engaged.
Okay, good. So it sounds like the goal was to talk about physiology and reinforce why physiology is important. You felt like you accomplished that goal in this moment. You're worried that it went a little bit too long. So do you mind if I open it up to the group?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
No, my question.
So group, let's start with the things that you saw that you really, in this clip, that you really liked. Ruth.
So this is Socratic method.
Okay.
Instruction. I mean, he gets the information out of beautiful.
Okay.
Sincerely.
Yeah. Well, and when you say, what was particularly effective about the way he used? Can anyone speak? Did anybody else notice that? Yeah, Rachel.
I noticed you asked a lot of why questions, which lend themselves to pathophysiology answers.
Okay. Andrea.
I liked how you were clear about whether the answers they were giving were right or wrong. You would say, somebody said, when you were asking what blood vessel is it, somebody said that's a capillary, and you were like, nope, that's not actually right. And then you explained why that's not right. You said, can you see a capillary?
But am I allowed to say it's not right? I thought I wasn't allowed to say
Yeah, but then when somebody was right, when somebody said, oh, I think it's an estrogen-mediated process, you were like, yeah, that's exactly right. And so it's clear.
And why did you think that was particularly effective?
Well, I think in contrast, sometimes when somebody says a wrong answer, I just won't acknowledge it either way. I'll just wait for somebody to say the right answer and then say that's right instead of saying no, that's wrong. And I think the reason I do that is I worry it's going to hurt the learning climate, but I don't think it did at all in yours because people were still chiming in with right and wrong answers.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if that had something to do with whether the learner, that they were all very senior learners, because I think when there are lower level learners in the room, the seniors are more reluctant to say something, to guess, or to think through it, because they don't want to be embarrassed by something they feel that they should know. Because I struggle with that. In that climate, I probably would have said, no, that's not right, but I get really nervous about embarrassing or making the senior feel less authoritative.
One thing isn't directly related to what we want to film. One thing that I always try to do is when I say something that's wrong, I try to come back the next day and say, oh, by the way, when I said so-and-so yesterday, that's not right. Just kind of set the environment that everybody makes mistakes.
Well, I'm
Doesn't know
wrong,
stuff.
I can't do that.
No, that's
Just kidding.
I think you used humor too to make it like a safe climate. When someone said that was guess, and you were like, yeah, that was guess. It was not guess. But like, kind of.
But it helps. Yeah.
It's not punitive.
So what I'm hearing is that by providing real-time feedback in the context of the session, it holds kind of a high expectation, but is done in a way that, and so for a variety of reasons that you guys have identified, the learning climate seemed to be protected in that clip, which it sounds like is something that a lot of folks in the audience are worried about, is preserving the learning climate. What else do you folks notice?
One of the things I noticed that I really liked is you used the Socratic method, but you didn't belabor it. I think sometimes we use the Socratic method. We just keep asking, it'll be a factually based question, and we keep asking questions trying to make people guess what we're thinking. You asked a question they didn't know, you might ask a follow-up question, but really, you didn't, we're not long dead spaces, and you didn't let people.
There was one nobody probably noticed it, but it was one thing where I paused for a fairly long period of time. I was trying to think of a question to illustrate that, and I couldn't think of one. I finally said, no, that's wrong.
Yeah.
But I was actually looking for a way to ask another question that might lead the person
But
to get the right
it didn't. Watching it,
Yeah.
didn't feel long.
Yeah.
It might have felt long to you while you were watching it because you've seen this before. But I watching a lot of people teach that they let the group hang and struggle. I really like that you didn't do that.
So
rather than let them struggle, you rephrase the question. Because that's a lot of times the trouble with the Socratic method. You don't really get what they're asking, and if you just rephrase it, then it becomes clear.
So things that helped the Socratic method in this clip be very helpful is that it kept moving. It wasn't like long drawing pieces of information out when it seemed like the group had a stuck point. So one of the things, rephrasing the question or recontextualizing the question, helped, again, to keep the pace moving so it didn't seem quite so painful. Yeah.
You know, you said, Tom, that you stuck too long on that one specific finding. I think one thing I might have done differently is get on with it about why do you even care about estrogen? How does it matter? You move it to the big, use a little too much time on the small.
Yeah, I thought, that's kind of the way I felt about watching it. I didn't feel that way doing it, but that's the way I felt about watching it.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually very, I didn't feel that way. I've seen this clip twice now, and I didn't feel that way. What I came away with is just a reminder how much stuff we take for granted that they know, that they don't know. You know, like, what is this? I mean, I love that. I love that whole thing. The first line, your first line is, you saying there are no spiders implies that you know what a spider is. I mean, but that's the kind of thing that it would be really easy to just gloss over. And I think we don't do enough of that sort of back to basics to check in when they say stuff like that. And I was incredibly impressed that they said that you called them out, they didn't know it, and how much physiology you could teach about something stupid like spiders. I mean, really, no, I learned a ton when I watched it. So I actually didn't feel it went too long, and it's a reminder to me that we need to do perhaps more basics.
Especially at the end when he came back and said he actually does have spiders, and we're going to go look at that. So they were like wrong on multiple.
I do this all the time, and this is better at the bedside. I mean, it's better when you can actually demonstrate it.
Well, and it sets the stage too for like, I'm paying attention to whether you're getting the physical exam findings, and I think it might make people pay more attention when they're doing the physical exam and have to report it to you. Yeah.
That doesn't work. You'd like to think so, but it doesn't actually work.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
If you had students in the room, I mean, because you have your sense of humor is your sense of humor and a little bit of sarcasm. Like, how could you visual acuity? You really think you could think that way? Would you have done the same?
I would have done the same thing, and then the other thing is I would start with the students. When the students don't know, I ask the residents or the interns. Usually the interns, and then when they don't know, I think that normalizes for the students. So I'm more likely to say something to something a little bit sarcastic to the intern that doesn't know to the student. Let me retract that. I'm equally likely to say something sarcastic to the.
So,
but then I if I do it to the interns when I do it to the students, or if I do it to the interns or to myself, the resident isn't affected by it, I think.
What's interesting is we showed this clip to the medical students and the teaching to teach, and this clip to me is the perfect demonstration of how you give direct feedback, move on, and keep a positive learning climate. They all were threatened by it. I think it's a really interesting thing to talk. Now they weren't in the room and they were just watching.
Where were they when you
Fourth.
Well, can you elaborate what they felt threatened by in that environment?
I think that it was a lot of the things that we have all just highlighted that we liked about this clip, which is that real-time feedback was given to say, no, that's not correct, and this is the correct answer. They felt that was too punishing.
What?
Yep.
I think that consistency is really important. If some faculty don't do it because they're worried that people will be shamed, then it's shaming when faculty do it. And we as a culture of teachers don't trust our students' resiliency, that I can imagine that fourth year students, no one's ever said, it's only 80% there, no one's ever given that to them, so it feels shaming because that isn't the culture in which they run.
So consistency both between faculty, but also probably within faculty, having been one of Dr. Painter's AIs, right? So I can remember that, but it was that's the norm of that's how you teach, right? So it didn't feel, because that happened every day in every teaching moment, it didn't feel directed, right, at one person versus another. So I think
don't actually say you're wrong every moment.
it happened.
Maybe every 3.
I was gonna
Every now and then they're right.
Yeah. But conversely, the other thing I would highlight that the group noticed is that you also rewarded correct answers. And I think that even to me it stood out that that praise is potentially more felt by the audience when you're doing both, right? When you're just giving positive feedback, then everybody's getting positive feedback. But when someone does have a right answer that's correct, I would imagine that person would feel more validated and positive from that too. So I think that's good. Dr. Painter's concern was that he felt like the clip went too long. What did the group kind of, and it seems like maybe hearing back from Dr. Elnicki's comment, you felt like you focused more narrowly on the spider itself as opposed to more broadly. Is that fair to say?
I think it took a little longer to get to the general than I would have liked. And I don't know whether I could have made that happen. I think I probably could have.
Okay.
I wonder, it seemed clear to me watching it that they just didn't know. They didn't know what the vessels were, and so they had no idea where it would revascularize. And I wonder whether you knowing that early on, whether it would have just been, okay, I need to tell them.
That makes sense. This was also a fairly complicated patient. There were lots of things to talk about, and more important things to his welfare than whether he had spiders or not. That's kind of why, when I look back at it, it seems like it may be correct a little bit.
Yeah, Bree.
I would say, I just think you did such an elegant job of bringing it together at the end. Like you said, the point of it wasn't the spider angiomas. It was that we have these little physical exam findings, and what is the significance of that? And that's what you brought the group back to in the end. And so I don't think it was perfect. I thought you drew their attention to what was most important about it.
So by bringing it back and explicitly naming that, in addition to it provided good teaching and filled knowledge gaps in real time, and then also by explicitly naming that, maybe help foster the buy-in and the relevance to the learning group. Am I getting that right, Bree?
No, so you allow them to struggle, because if they don't struggle at all, they won't remember your explanation. Yeah.
Good. Are other people teaching physiology much in their kind of clinical based practice? And if so, how's that going? Or are there, I guess what I'm getting at is the piece where I'd like to kind of name some of these strategies, compare, contrast to what we're doing as a group potentially now, and think about things that we all could do differently kind of moving forward. That's a complex question. Yes.
I try really hard to do it. I
Okay.
have to work really hard to do it because it doesn't come naturally. So I have to prepare, but I usually prepare by pictures. And so I try to do a picture with every physiology bit.
Okay.
Because that's how I remember it.
And when you incorporate in that teaching moment with the pictures that you've kind of conceptualized and thought about yourself, how do you present that to your learners?
On the board.
On the board.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's how I Socratically, that's how I ask questions.
Okay. And you use that image as the jumping off point.
Yeah.
Okay. Other folks? Bree?
So just Dr. McNeil walked me through this. So like I did like a little section on glomerulonephritis. So I was trying to like understand the pathophysiology of nephritic versus nephrotic syndrome, and I made a worksheet for my team about it. But it's definitely outside of my comfort zone.
Uh-huh.
Like then the worry is that they ask you questions that you don't know the answer to, which happen every once in a while, and then you just kind of have to say like, I don't know. I think one of the students asked like, well, you know, would your creatinine really go up in nephrotic syndrome? And, like asked really like a nitpicky something that I didn't know the answer to, right? And so when you go down to like really the nuts and bolts of the pathophysiology, I think it can be really hard because then sometimes you're out of
teacher,
touch. I'm out of my element. Like,
okay.
like it because it forces us to go back to what we were doing and what we learned in med school.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I use it in teaching when we as a team or whatever, a preceptor, resident pair are stumped about what could be going on with the patient. Like we had an idea, but that doesn't seem to be panning out, and trying to use pathophysiology of or what we're observing to see if it fits with the diagnoses, which is something that comes from the clinical reasoning world. And I also want to make the point that a few years ago when we did a clinical reasoning thing where we had residents do some cases using some prompts from Dr. Follansby's checklist, for anyone who's familiar with that. One of the really interesting things that came out of the focus groups after that was these were third-year residents discussing the usefulness of pathophysiology, and most of the quotes were like, I don't use pathophysiology, I'm too experienced, I just look at the case and the elements and then I know what it is, and this is like a waste of time. And that was sad, but also highlighted that they either didn't realize they were using pathophysiology when they really were, or that they didn't recognize that that's still important even when you become experienced. And I think it's nice to see people role model
that
in clinical setting.
Andrea.
I think a time when pathophysiology is really helpful is when you're trying to come up with a framework for a differential diagnosis. So, for example, we were talking about hoarse voice yesterday in ambulatory preclinic conference for the residents, and so thinking about okay, what causes your voice to be hoarse? Is it something on the vocal cord? Is it something wrong with the nerves innervating the vocal cord? Thinking about what buckets of things can you put things in. That's when I think pathophysiology is most useful in teaching.
Good. So it sounds to me like people are doing this in a variety of different ways, in terms of potentially disease complexes which lend themselves to revisiting pathophysiology, using it in terms of clinical reasoning, bucket building for differential diagnosis. In general, in any sort of case, it sounds like bringing it back using a handout or a diagram to help frame your questions and why this is important seems like it can be a helpful thing. And I think we all felt like this was a really effective teaching moment, and didn't, to us, drag on, potentially because of the way that you brought it back and named the importance at the end. So
There were not long pauses. I'm sure it felt painful to you watching it.
It was just the one time that
But
I could hear myself thinking actually when I was watching it. I knew exactly what I was thinking at the time when I was watching it.
So now,
just the one thing I would comment on is people talk about preparing, which I do sometimes for this, and I again kind of normalize the idea. I always say I don't actually know this stuff off the top of my head. I had to look this up, and so we're going to go over now what I looked up last night, which I hope is a positive message that that there's things that.
I was going to say, the other thing that happens to me all the time when I'm launching into this is I'm talking big conceptual physiologic moments, and all of a sudden they start naming enzymes. And because it's like I'm better at the big picture, they're better at because they just took their boards. They're in the enzymes, and I'm like, no.
Plus, those things hadn't been discovered when you were.
Well, yeah, right. Exactly. I'm like, Mendelian genetics, But I'm perfectly comfortable saying that may well be the enzyme. You guys are closer to that than I am, but let me frame it for you. And I think, that's Tom echoed it. Tom said it. I'm going to echo it. Saying you don't know is such a gift to your learner. Such a gift to your learner.
good. So thank you for the nice discussion. Before we move on, the last piece of this is to kind of, a few people raise their hand and volunteer. Share with me something that you saw or heard to discuss today that you want to try in your future teaching. So first I'll ask for volunteers and then I'll cold call.
And tell them they're wrong.
And then I'll tell you you're wrong. Exactly. Siobhan, anything you saw today?
So I think a lot of the teaching that we do is kind of on the fly with patient rounds, because when we're on service, you are doing all of the procedures and then you're hearing about the cases
Mm-hmm.
So having, I think, basic understanding of a couple of the things that you know that you're going to see repeatedly and incorporating the physiology of that, 'cause I think it helps the learners, even the fellows, remember like why you triage people in such a way or what you need to look for. I think we come across things as like checking if people loan every 4 hours and a completely stable patient who maybe had some bleeding is not necessarily helpful, and why that's not necessarily helpful.
Okay.
So even though you don't know what's coming to you, there's things that
You know you're going to experience, okay? And it sounds like connecting that physiology to your management plan will be helpful for your learners. Good. Rachel?
I was thinking, I think I will actually maybe challenge the foundational knowledge a little bit more. 'Cause it always amazes me how up to date on the literature our learners are, particularly the GME learners. And it also amazes me how they don't know some of the more fundamental things like this person has heart failure, yes, but the physiology in this person who has primary lung disease is very different than the physiology of this person with coronary artery disease. And so I think I'll maybe push the more foundational concepts
Okay.
to challenge.
Beautiful. One more. I saw some, yeah.
So I am scared of physiology, so I often don't do it. But I think that I would take an approach more like Missy was saying, like that big picture approach, because I'm the same way. Like they start talking about it, and I'm like, and so just kind of making sure that I cover it more and work, like make myself do it more, take myself out of my comfort zone, but and then also feel like I can be empowered to be like, that sounds like a biochemistry thing that you guys can talk about on your boards, but let's focus on, again, this kind of bigger picture.
Bigger picture. Beautiful. Okay. So thank you all for playing. We're going to now step out of the video review. And I just kind of like to extend some of our personal experiences, what has helped to make this a success in the bigger picture. So as you all might imagine, showing video of yourself is not a particularly comfortable thing. So I would highlight that maintaining a safe learning environment is really crucial for doing something like this and making it a success. So ways that we kind of intentionally try to create safe environment is one, letting the presenter of the day choose their video segment and frame a question around which feedback will be given. And I would also highlight the role of the facilitator in taking the elicited feedback and framing it as skills-based, kind of behaviorally based things. The other thing that was really helpful was involving faculty from across all levels of rank and experience, and that helps really eliminate hierarchy and generate buy-in and foster this mindset of growth that everyone, senior, junior faculty, regardless of experience, have challenges within their teaching and can benefit from feedback and shared experience. Oh dear. Oops. So together, these things kind of help create I don't know what's happening here, a community of teaching, what we would call a community of teaching practice where the peers are really like coaches, right? Dedicated, and we're all dedicated to this shared mission of providing high quality teaching. We're lucky in the Division of General Internal Medicine because we have a pre-existing faculty development series. We have a large group of really engaged clinician educators, and I recognize that not every division or department may be structured in that same way. So I also wanted to share some tips generally about how you might get something like this started. So first, I would say you need to find a champion, and maybe that's you or maybe that's someone else that would really like to implement this. And ideally, you would have support from your divisional leadership, right? And then you need to find some other faculty who would also be interested in doing this. And then once you have buy-in, you have to individualize how you run sessions based on your unique setting and resources. So things to consider would be when, where, and how often to have sessions. We've really found that doing this longitudinally and making it standing has really normalized participation and hopefully mitigated to some extent the discomfort of video review. And then also you want to make sure that you talk to whoever is going to facilitate, if that's yourself or someone else, about techniques that you can do to maintain a safe environment. And then finally, if this like videoing is a prohibitive factor potentially for your group, there are lots of resources. For example, the ABIM makes a lot of set kind of teaching videos that could be used in place of real-time teaching videos in your setting. So you could consider that. And certainly we're available for consultation. And I'll do some hopefully graceful self-promotion, which is if you're interested in kind of our formal analysis of, we evaluated this qualitatively and have this will come out in the June edition of JGME. So if you're interested in looking at our formal results, you're welcome to look there. And with that, I guess I will wrap up and take any questions from the audience. So thank you so much. Anything?
It's really cool.
Thanks. You're welcome to come.
Do it next.
Huh? Oh, am I?
I'm
Oh,
wondering what, you know, is next year I'll be in a different setting and I am going to miss this whole division terribly.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering what kind of ongoing faculty development environment I'm going to be in. So my light bulb's on for sure.
okay. Yeah, you'll have to get in there, I think, and feel out kind of what resources and what kind of team and who your players might be. But I'm sure you can find a pack of people. And if I can be of any help, we've taken this show on the road many times, so
I like
happy
that.
to help.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, Sarah, I would actually advocate for having yourself filmed and watching yourself teach, which I had never done until the last couple of years, just because the opportunities didn't really exist. Particularly for younger people, because I think a lot of people that are transitioning from learner to teacher have a certain amount of fear that who the hell am I and why am I doing this and how do, where do I get off teaching? And I think watching yourself teach is in most cases reassuring that you actually do know some stuff and you're able to accomplish it. And I find it to be a real barrier for new teachers is they know more than I do, so how who am I? And they don't actually know more than you do. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
At least they don't know the same stuff you do. They may know more than
They
you
know
do.
the enzyme, but no,
They don't know,
cares.
they don't know the same stuff. The other thing is, I think a lot of times it helps to watch it because you don't stumble as much as you think you do. You don't hem and haw as much as you think you do. Or if you do, you need to know it, and it'd be really helpful. But I think that's an important thing for you to realize is that you can. I'm sure sometimes you walk out of the room thinking, I really botched that, and I'm not sure that in every case I think that in many cases that's actually not true. You didn't really botch it, and I really felt I was stumbling and hemming and hawing, and is probably an exaggeration. You remember the time you did it, and you don't remember I remember the time I stopped talking because I was trying to come up with a question, and that. But I would walk away thinking I spent the whole time hemming and hawing when in fact it happened for a fairly brief period of time.
Yeah. So this whole like self-assessment piece is really hard to do, and it's also really hard to, I think, especially for people like myself who are early in their practice, to be teaching, be attending to the learners, and then also in this kind of meta way be thinking about how my teaching is going and the techniques that I'm doing. So taking this time out, this snippet, can be very helpful to recontextualize all of that and process and digest it, instead of just leaving the session saying, oh, that went well, period, or oh, that went poorly, period. Dr. Arnold.
I think if people are going to do this, it's extraordinarily important to frame it the great way that Sarah framed it, where it's about what have people in what Tom did well, and then focus on the thing that Tom was unsure of, particularly for most communities of medical school teachers. If you just say, how did it go, they will all focus on the 7 things that they had different opinions on, and then no one else will ever want to be videotaped. And so you didn't call that out very much, and yet I think if people are going to try this group has been trained in a certain way, and so they're less likely to do it, and yet I think it's really important to do this.
And I didn't do this a lot up front with this group. Maybe I should have been more explicit about kind of naming at the front of the session, naming the goal for all of us to learn from one another and be better teachers, and setting explicitly kind of limits of confidentiality. I think just naming those things, we all hope that everyone understands and is going to be respectful, right? And I think in a large part, especially in the group that's done this longitudinally, that kind of behavior is normed. But especially as you're getting started, just making those things explicit up front can be very helpful. I agree. Cool. All right, well, if nothing else, thank you all for coming this morning. Have a great rest of your day.